Hi, this is Angela Galloway, and we are working in Chapter 13 right now. For my Math 146 class, this would be Unit 2, the very last section. And so 13.4, we're going to go over mortgages and seeing how interest and payments that we've talked about in other sections works with a large loan like a mortgage. And hopefully maybe you'll learn some new stuff that you didn't already know. If you haven't bought a house before, maybe it's stuff you haven't thought about. If you have bought a house, then some of these things you may know or you may not. You know, sometimes we use credit cards or get mortgages or buy a car or whatever, and we don't always know all the small details in the background, right, about how that interest is accruing and all that. So we're going to try to go over that in this section, and I'll also have my calculator so that if you do have a graphing calculator, you can kind of see how we can use it. But if you don't, we also have a chart that you can use instead to calculate the mortgage and calculate what your monthly payment is going to be. All right. So this section is also going to be helpful when you're talking about or looking at your mortgage project, right? Because this is all about mortgages. So here we have a few of the terms that we're going to see for this chapter, or this section really. Mortgage is just a loan for a substantial amount, right? So typically we're talking about a home or something, right? Maybe a lot of land or whatever, but usually we're talking about a home. The term, that's kind of just a new term that we use to talk about the time until we pay off the loan. So you might hear things like, you know, this is a 30-year term mortgage or 25-year, and so that's what that's talking about. We do usually have a down payment when we're talking about a large purchase like a house. You know, they talk about how it'd be good if you have a 20% down payment. Not all of us can do that, you know, depending on the price of your house, but a down payment is beneficial, you know, because the less amount that you're borrowing at the beginning of your loan, the less interest you're going to have to pay, right? So as much as you can pay down at the beginning, that's really going to save you a lot of money over time. The principal amount of the mortgage is the amount borrowed, and then we're going to be talking about fixed rate mortgages. Fixed rate, kind of how it sounds, the rate stays the same for the entire 20 or 30 years that you're paying it off. There is something also called an adjustable rate mortgage, and so that one, if you were looking at it like in a bank or something, it would call it an ARM, so it looks like ARM, and the ARM is the adjustable rate mortgages. Those aren't offered as much anymore because we saw a lot of negative effects with the adjustable rate mortgages, especially with the housing crisis, you know, several years ago when house prices dropped. A lot of people now owned a house that maybe they still had a larger mortgage on than what the house was actually worth. And so they might end up defaulting on the loan, but the adjustable rate mortgage, you might start out with a 7% interest rate, and after so many years, it would go up to another interest rate. And the thought process was that when you first got the loan, say maybe you're 25, you know, you're thinking, well, in 5 years, I should be making more at my job, or maybe I'll have more money saved up, or whatever you're thinking of, okay? But then 5 years comes, and you're like, okay, I don't really have that extra money I was expecting, but now my mortgage payment gets bigger because my rate has adjusted to this new term, whatever it is. And so that's difficult, you know, when you don't know what's that payment going to be in 5 years or 10 years. So with a fixed rate, you're going to have that same rate forever, and you're going to know exactly, you know, what your monthly payment's going to be. All right, so going back here, we do have this regular monthly payment formula. So to figure out our monthly payment, this is one way we can do it. It's not my favorite way because it is somewhat difficult to put in the calculator just because there's, first of all, there's a fraction. So sometimes that is difficult. But then also you just have to be very careful with parentheses. Mainly you want to make sure that this whole thing, when you put it in the calculator, is set apart as the numerator. Then you would do the division sign in the calculator and then make sure this whole thing is in its own set of parentheses as the denominator. Otherwise, you're going to get a weird answer. Okay, so that is the first method. The second method is fairly easy to do once we talk about how to use the chart, and that's probably what most of you will use, is just the chart. If you have a graphing calculator, we're going to see how we can use the TVM Solver for that. And so either of these two are good options. It just depends on if you have the graphing calculator or not. All right, so moving on to the next slide here. This is the mortgage payment chart here. So it says monthly payments to repay principal and interest on a $1,000 mortgage. So what this chart is telling us is how much we would have to pay every month if we borrowed $1,000. Now, obviously, most mortgages are going to be more than $1,000, right? You're usually not just borrowing $1,000 for a house. So because of that, we're going to think of how much we borrowed in terms of thousands. All right. So for example, over here, if we're borrowing $120,000, then that's going to be like 120 thousands, right? So we end up finding our value in here and multiplying by the number of thousands that you're borrowing. Okay, so looking at this first example, $120,000 mortgage at 6% for 20 years. Okay, so here's our rate. So we would go here to the 6%. We go over here to the 20 years, right? And then we just see where they meet, right? And so they'd meet right there at 7.16431. So if I borrowed $1,000, I would pay $7.16 about a month for 20 years, right? And then I would have it paid off. But I didn't just borrow $1,000, right? I borrowed $120,000. So we're going to take that number and multiply by the number of thousands that we borrowed, which is 120. And so then I multiply that out and I get $859.72. All right, now if we wanted to know, how much do we end up paying for this house over time, then we're going to take that monthly payment and say we're paying this for 20 years, which is 240 payments. So $859.72 times 240 is $206,332.80. So that's actually how much we pay for that $120,000 house. We end up paying $206,000 over those 20 years. So you do pay a lot of interest on a mortgage because it's usually for a very long period of time, like 20 or 30 years. So I guess one of the things I would say is when we talk about these mortgages, some things to think about if you are getting a mortgage or you are buying a house, or thinking about it in the future is try to do the shortest term possible. If you have the option between a 20-year, 25-year, 30-year, if you can do the 25-year, if you can afford that monthly payment, just shortening the term of the loan 5 years, it's going to save you thousands of dollars over the life of the loan. And it may not increase your monthly payment that much. It kind of depends on how much you're borrowing and what the interest rate is. But it may be doable. If it's just $30, $40 more a month, but ends up saving you $15,000, that might be worth it, right? Also, finding a lower rate, of course, is important. If we're talking about something that's going out 20 or 30 years, if I have a 4.5% interest rate or a 5% interest rate or a 4.8% interest rate, even though those all sound very similar, right? It's like, well, 4.5, 4.8, what does it matter? Well, it matters a lot when you're talking about applying that monthly for 20 or 30 years, right? Then you end up with a large difference between 4.5% or 4.8%. So when you're shopping for mortgages, you want to make sure that you're getting the best rate possible. So if you see one that's a little lower than another one, it's probably a good deal to go ahead and try to go with that lower one, okay, even if it just looks like a very small difference. All right. And then another thing is, if your monthly payment is, say, $600 a month, right? If you pay a little more every month, so maybe you pay $620 a month, that extra money that you pay is going to go straight to the principal, right? And then the principal is what the interest is based off of. So if you pay down that principal faster, you're going to end up with less interest you have to pay back, and you'll end up paying off that loan sooner, which again is going to save you money in the long run. Okay, so just some things to think about in general with mortgages. So we have this other example here with the $95,000. Again, we did the same thing, 5.5% for 30 years. And we go over here and we see we've got 5.67789. We multiply that by 95 because that's how many thousands we borrowed, and we get the 539.40. All right, so how we can do this in our calculator. I like doing it in the calculator, but if you don't have the calculator, then that's not really an option. But in the calculator, what we're going to do is we're going to turn it on, right, and go to the apps in finance. And the TVM Solver is where we go when we're doing any kind of compound interest type problem. So in the N value, we're going to put the number of months, right? The number of months that we're paying for this house. So in the example we did earlier for the $120,000 loan, we are doing 20 years and then 12 times a year, right? So 12 months in a year for 20 years, and we could push enter and it'll go ahead and solve that part for us. The interest rate was 6%. Remember, in the calculator, when we're doing this TVM Solver, we actually put in the percent and not as a decimal. The present value, we are borrowing $120,000. And the trick to this, to being able to get this to work out, is that you want the future value to be 0, right? Because after these 20 years, we're not going to owe anything else, right? It's going to be done. And so the future value of the loan will be 0. And then almost always these are going to be 12 because we're usually making monthly payments, right? So then go back up here to the payment area and do alpha, enter, and then you get your monthly payment, right? $859.72, which is the same thing we got when using the chart. So just another way you can do it. Just to show you kind of the difference. Let's say we found another option that was 5.5%. So if we change that and then calculated this again, so now it's $829, right? So it went down $30, right? $30 a month is $360 a year, right? And then times 20 years is a lot, right? So just a little bit of a change in the interest is going to make a big change over the life of the loan, right, for you. So you want to remember that when you're looking at different mortgages. All right, so the next concept we talk about is amortization, which is just talking about paying off your mortgage so that at the beginning of your mortgage, you're paying the same monthly payment, but most of your payment is going just towards the interest. Okay, so your payment is never going to change if you have a fixed rate loan. So my example here, I said, let's say, your monthly payment is $850. Okay, well, it's always going to be $850 until 20 or 30 years is over. But with your very first payment here, most of it is going towards interest. So you may have $850 as your monthly payment, but $700 may go toward just interest, and the leftover, the $150, would get to go to your principal. So that's also something to think about when you have just bought a home, is that after a year or 2 or 3, you still haven't paid a lot of money towards the principal. Most of it's gone just towards interest, just paying the bank or loan company back for letting you borrow the money. Okay, so you really have to get farther along, somewhere down here, where you start to see the interest decreasing, the principal increasing, so you're really starting to put more of your money into the principal, which means you own more of your house, right? So when you're just paying interest, the interest is just going straight to the bank, right? It's not giving you any equity in the home, right? You don't own any more of the home than you did to start with. So you really do have to stay in the home for a little while to finally get some equity or to be able to sell the house and actually make money back, unless home prices suddenly rise, very fast. Then, if you bought a house and now it's worth $30,000 more, well, yeah, you would be able to make some money, right? But if home prices don't change a whole lot in those first few years of having a house, you still probably don't own a lot of the house, is kind of my point. There is a little video you can watch here, but you could put that into YouTube or something, just put in amortization or explaining amortization and kind of see how that works. So we are going to calculate or create some amortization schedules. The amortization schedule will tell you how much interest you're going to have to pay for that month, how much of your monthly payment is going to go towards the principal, and then what your new balance of principal will be for the next month. Okay, so technically you could do this for every month, but we're just going to do it for 1 or 2 months and see how that monthly payment is distributed into interest and principal. And then from there we can kind of assume what will happen in the following months, right? But so this one we have a $145,000 mortgage, so that is what they borrowed. It has a term of 30 years, 4.5% interest, and we're going to prepare an amortization schedule for the first 2 months. Okay, now the first thing we're doing is we're going to find the monthly payment, right? Because that's what we need to know to be able to figure out how much money we're going to have for interest and principal. Okay, so we're going to look up 30 years and 4.5% if you're using the chart. So 4.5%, 30 years, we get 5.06685, right? So that's where I got this. And then multiplied times 145, because that's how much we're borrowing, right? And we get $734.69. Most of the examples we do in our homework typically you're going to have mortgage payments around $500 to $1,000. So they're not going to be huge. You shouldn't get a monthly payment of $10,000. Okay, they should be around $1,000, so a little less, maybe a little more, but somewhere around there, okay? So what we're doing in the amortization thing is our amortization schedule. We already have the monthly payment. So I know that's what I'm going to be paying every month. But what we might also want to know is how much of that monthly payment actually goes towards the cost of my house, right? So my house cost $145,000. But in the first month, that whole $700 is not going to go straight into my principal, okay? And what we see down here is, first we're going to calculate the interest, because we have to pay back the bank or the loan company first before any of the money is going to go towards our principal. So in that first month, we owe this much to start with, because this is the very first month. We owed $145,000. Sorry, I don't have the screen full. There you go. $145,000. We're paying 4.5% interest, and we're just doing it for 1 month. So that's why I use the 1/12. So this is using the simple interest formula where I equals PRT, right? So here's our principal, the rate, and then the time, remember, is always in years. So that's why I have the 1/12, because it's just 1 month, which is 1/12 of a year. And that gives me interest of $543.75. So just in that 1 month, I've accrued $543 of interest. So we have to pay that off first. Okay, so we've got that. Then whatever's left over is going to go towards the principal. Okay, so I'm always paying this amount, the $734. But I subtract off the amount of interest from that month, okay? And the leftover, the $190.94, that's actually what's going to go into the principal. So after my first month of owning this house, I technically only own $190.94 of my $145,000 house. Okay, so even though I paid in $730, I only owe about $190 of the house, right? And then the last step is just preparing you for the next month. The last step is, now let's see how much we owe on the house. So after I paid this much into my principal, I subtract that from my starting principal balance. And this is now what I owe for the next month. And so if we go into the second month, we do the same thing, but just noticing that now our principal has changed, right? Now I only owe $144,809. But I do all the process again, and then after the second month, I'll have that much left to pay off. All right? So every month that goes by, your interest payment is going to decrease, right? Because we're going to have a lower principal, which means the interest calculated on that principal will be lower. But my principal payment will increase every month, right? So just a little, right? It'll just be a few dollars to start off with. But after a year or 2 years or 3 years, you're going to start to see a lot more of your monthly payment going towards principal. All right? Okay, so in addition to the mortgage payment is just paying off principal and interest, right? So just like when you buy a car, you've got the cost of the car that you have to pay for, but then you also have to pay for gas, you have to pay for your title and registration, you have to pay for your license plate, you have to pay for oil changes, there's all these other things you have to pay for with the car, right? So maybe you can afford the cost of the car, but not all the extras. And so the same thing goes for houses. You calculate how much the mortgage is going to be and what the monthly payment is. But you have to remember that there's going to be other costs associated with the house besides just paying off that principal and interest. So one of those that often is rolled into your mortgage is the closing cost. Closing costs are one-time expenses that are due when the loan is finalized, so when you purchase the house. Usually closing costs equal like 2 to 5% of the purchase price. So I would say for a typical house, it's going to be $3,000 to $5,000 probably for closing cost. Some examples of what goes into closing cost: lots of fees, right? A loan origination fee, your broker loan fee, title insurance fee, blah, 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 right? Lots of different fees that you have to pay, mainly just to different companies, different people that are helping you get the money, helping you set up all the paperwork that you have to fill out, etc. Okay? So just a reminder of that. So if you buy a $120,000 house, you may have another $3,000 of closing cost. So when you're getting your loan, you may actually need a loan for like $123,000. It just kind of depends on if you're going to use your part of your down payment to pay off some of that closing cost, or what you're going to do. And other things we're going to look at is all houses have to have insurance, and then also property taxes. All right, so in general, insurance for Kentucky houses are usually between $1,500 and $2,500 right now. Now, of course, the bigger your house is, the more the insurance is going to cost, right? But for a typical like 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, it's going to be somewhere around $1,500 to $2,500. Property taxes are going to change depending on where you live. So in Warren County, where I am and where probably a lot of you are, it depends on what part of Warren County you live in. So if you live in the city, which means that you live inside the city limits and your kids go to city schools, then you have the highest tax. Okay, so you pay 1.371% of your house assessment value, which means what your house is worth. So if your house is worth $200,000, then that tax is based off of that. Even if you bought it for $100,000, it's going to be calculated based on what that house is worth at the time. All right. Then you've got the BG Annex. The Annex is when you still live within the city limits, but your kids would go to county schools. Like that would be probably like a lot of Three Springs, Cumberland Trace. I'm more familiar with the south side of Bowling Green. So those would all, their kids don't go to city schools, but they're still within the city limits. And then Warren County, that would include, Alvaton, most of Plano. When you're outside of the city limits and your kids go to county schools, then you have the lowest tax bracket there. Then you're going to only pay about a 0.8% tax. Now, just for comparison, I kind of looked up some other counties around us. So Simpson County seems to have just a one tax for the whole county. It's at 0.729%. Allen County is at 0.9789%. So just wherever you're moving or wherever you live, you can look that up. Like for Bowling Green, you can look it up here. But just search property taxes in your area and you should be able to find that. And of course, those are things that change. Like the Bowling Green ones just changed in the last year, in 2019, I think. So, they can always go up. They're probably not going to go down, but they can always go up some. So, kind of listen to that when you hear that going on. So this example is going to be pretty similar to what your mortgage project will be like. So we've got the purchase price of a house. We have a down payment. We have our interest rate and the term of the loan. This house is in the city limits, so we are going to use that tax rate for the city limits. And it says assume that the home assessment is equal to the purchase price. So that's not always true, but we're going to assume that we bought the house for $125,000, and that's also what it's worth, is $125,000. So that's what our tax is going to be based off of. And then the yearly insurance premium, that would be something you would get a quote from an insurance company, right? So we're just going to say that our insurance premium for the whole year is $1,752. So first we're going to start with our mortgage payment. So we bought the house for $125,000. We have a $15,000 down payment. So when we subtract those, we get $110,000. So that's where this 110 comes from, right? Is the number of thousands we borrowed. This number comes from the chart by looking at 5% for 30 years. We get the 5.36822. And when we multiply those, we get a monthly mortgage payment of $590.50. For our taxes, we're going to take the value of the home, which we said is going to be the $125,000, and we're going to multiply by this rate here, So make sure you move the decimal enough places. So this would be 0.01371. And that comes out to $1,713.75. And then we're looking for the monthly payment, right? So we need this to be divided by 12 so we know how much we're paying per month. And so that is what this would be. $142.81 is your monthly payment. And the same thing for insurance. We know what the yearly payment would be, but how much will we pay monthly? So we divide by 12 and we get $146. So if I add all three of these together, this would actually be my total monthly payment for the house. Okay, so that would include paying the principal and interest back to the loan company, paying my taxes, and my insurance. Okay, so that's what you would want to make sure falls in your budget. And of course, there's lots of other things that go with homes, like electric bills and water bills and upkeep of the house and those kind of things, right? But this is just the bare minimum that you're going to have to pay, right? You have to pay your mortgage, you have to pay taxes and insurance, okay? And then after that, you know, it can fluctuate depending on a lot of factors, right? But this would be definitely what you would be paying every month. All right, and then we have just another example here. Kind of looks the same, right? Just different numbers, okay? And we end up getting to a total payment there of $1,475.34. All right, so for your mortgage project, which you can find in Blackboard, there's a menu item that says projects, and you can click in there and find the mortgage project. I have a list or a file of 4 houses, right? You can choose any of the 4 houses, so they're just labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Once you pick which house you want, then go to the mortgage project worksheet that actually has all the questions and tell me which house you chose, and then continue all the questions based off of that one house. Okay, so you only have to do it for one house, not all 4. And then you're going to decide which bank option is the best. The best could be the one with the lowest monthly payment, or maybe the best for you is the one that has the least amount of interest. That's kind of just up to you. But I just want you to do the exercise thinking of like if this really was a house you were buying and then you're shopping for loans and trying to find the best one. And just really looking at the numbers more than just, well, I punched it into the calculator and this is my answer, right? But just seeing how a little change in a percent or a change in a term can make your overall payment change and can end up affecting, you know, your interest paid by tens of thousands of dollars over the life of the loan, okay? So if you have any questions about the mortgages, you know, feel free to contact me at angela.galloway at kctcs.edu, or you can come by my office anytime. I'm in Building C, Room 10, if you have any questions. We also have free tutoring, remember, on campus. If you're here at Sky CTC, we have free tutoring in Building L that you can contact Mr. Dooley and set up an appointment there. We also have open math labs every Friday in C8, and we have tutors, and that's all free. And I also added a new link into our Blackboard page for BrainFuse, and BrainFuse gives you free online tutoring. And right now you've got 7 hours of free tutoring, which is really a lot to use. They said that most sessions last about 15 minutes. So 7 hours should get you through a lot of the material we cover. So feel free to use that. There's a link for it on Blackboard, and you're welcome to use that for whatever subject you might have a question about. All right. Well, I hope you enjoy learning about mortgages. This is the end of Chapter 13, which is Unit 2. So after this section, you should be ready to take your unit exam. All right. Well, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.